Yeah, so in the world that we're in, all this disruption, all that, it's created some gaps, and there's a rush, of course, to fill those gaps. But is the answer just going to be stopgap in this digital world? So that's what our next panel is going to be all about. Our next panel consists of Sreeram Iyer, Chief Operating Officer, Institutional Banking at ANZ Banking Group, Anna Green, Head of ISV, Asia Pacific and Japan, AWS, Dr. Wolfgang Baier, who is the Group CEO at the Luxasia Group, and we're handing you, of course, to one of our favorites, our moderator, Vice President, Office of Business Development, Singapore Management University, Professor Annie Ko.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I am delighted to be here and talking about gaps. My biggest apologies to my panelists. I think they've waited for about 10 minutes. So we are going to cut to the chase. This is an amazing panel because we are going to talk about in what ways have this crisis created agenda changes? And has it been done at the board level, at the company and customer level, and at the people and employees level? So I'm going to start with Anna, actually. Anna, you've actually played a role of bridging the gaps between the tech people as well as the business people. So I thought maybe we could start with it. Has this crisis brought these two streams of talent closer together? And how do we bridge the gap between them? Could we go ahead with you?
Sure. Look, I've been fortunate enough to work both in banking and in tech, and I'm humbled to be joined by a former colleague of mine, Sreeram, who I can very safely say is leading the charge from a banking perspective. But certainly what I see between the cloud business, which AWS is in, and banking is an absolute imperative for senior executives to start talking to each other about these issues in a much more business-centered way. We have examples of that across the board in terms of the way that our customers, say, for instance, in New Zealand, we have a customer who is working in accounting software, and they've really had to engage very deeply with their CEO and their Chief Marketing Officer, which are conversations that previously were really never happening. These were decisions that were typically being made at a CEO level, and then separately there would be a CTO or a CIO conversation taking place. But now we're finding that boards, not just boards, but also industry bodies. So I was fortunate enough to be a member of the Banking Association of the Philippines previously, and I can tell you that it was the number one thing that they were discussing. How do we tackle not just one, but many of these issues that the digital agenda is presenting for our customers and for our businesses? So it's absolutely key, and it's absolutely changed the dynamic and the discussion that's happening at a boardroom level.
Wonderful, Anna. This is music to my ears. So this whole crisis actually created opportunities. And I think, Wolfgang, this is where you jump in. Because, converting and transforming Luxasia Private Limited. I know you have plenty of stories, but quickly give us some great insights and how this digital agenda is now built into your corporate strategy. Wolfgang.
Oh, we're very happy. Thanks, Annie. I think the interesting one is, as we know and as we see, is kind of all of those changes that are happening now and are basically accelerations. There are not a lot of new things happening. It's basically everything that we knew it's going to happen in the future over the next 3 to 5 years. It's now happening between 3 months and 18 months. And I think that this is something that acceleration of trends, kind of across the whole board is something that we really kind of now integrated into our strategy. It's obviously very important in the luxury industry, with our over 150 brands, across the whole of Asia Pacific. You can see things shifting very, very fast. E-commerce is now a very large kind of a part of our business, grew 10 times within 1 year, and basically means kind of if we are not ready for that, if our partners are not ready for that, we won't be able to really get going and grab the future opportunities. So I think what we basically looked into when we thought about the strategy now going forward is that digital is not only an enabler, but digital now really needs to touch every part of the corporate strategy going forward. I'm talking about omnichannel for the last 10 years, but omnichannel is really live now, because it's a combination of digital, physical touch points, and it's going everywhere. Because at the end of the day, technology touches human beings. And so I think you really need to look at it holistically. The second one is, what we basically realized is the leaders need to know about digital technology and transformation. If the leaders don't understand it, it's very, very difficult to engage your whole company, your unit, your partners. So I think we're really putting a lot of emphasis now on capability building, and not only down the line, where we took retail people and put them into e-commerce this year, because there was no retail, and we basically really upskilled a lot of our people, but also at the top, that people basically go more into startup environments. People start to understand digital and basically really have the ability to test it. And the last, but certainly not least, is the flexibility. From previously quarterly strategy reviews, we now down to bi-weekly reviews. From a 5-year plan that we threw out of the window, we're now basically in an 8 months rolling plan, where we said we need to grab those opportunities that are out there much, much clearer. And so I think these are some of the key changes that we have seen coming from that acceleration.
Very nice, Wolfgang. I want to come back to you about customers in a little while and whether their consumption habits have changed. But before we get there, I love it that you said we need to roll from people, from leaders to people at the ground. So Sreeram, welcome again. And I'm curious, 20 countries that you're looking after. So in this COVID times with remote working, how do you incentivize people? How do you get them motivated? How do you build capabilities across so many countries?
Well, 20 countries, I don't want you to be thinking differently. It's more for LinkedIn, but yeah, there are 20 countries. But firstly, thank you for this invitation to yourself and to CIO Academy, Professor. I tell you, this crisis has opened up, apart from the health challenges, of course, has opened up so many business opportunities that are in the positive quadrant of doing business as opposed to the kind of negative quadrant. And there are so many opportunities that have come about. Now, if I park the business strategy at a board level and the customer on the one hand, and I look inward into the people, which was your question, I think there is more that is done positive on the impact of people than the challenges of working from home and the challenges of meeting customer expectations. Why do I say that? I think for the first time almost in the way I think about it, the contribution and the recognition of the value that so many thousand employees in the front line enable customer outcomes has got recognized right at the top of the house as never before. And the vast invisible teams have got really far more visible than in my career that I've seen in the past. And that itself is a big source of motivation. The second is about culture, Professor. And what COVID has taught us is what is the organizational culture? What are the values, the compassion, the empathy, and the health, and the way you deal with your people, which is manifesting itself in the form of how CEOs of the companies and how boards are messaging to its employees. And there, many companies have scored really high in taking care of people, and that's what people want. Yes, compensation is a big factor in how you get motivated, but there is many more to the factor of motivation than mere financial compensation. So I think frontline recognition of contribution has gone to a whole new level. The third thing I'd say is that banks are famous for KYC, mostly in doing it improperly than doing it well. But this time around, I prefer to call it KYP, is know your people. And what COVID has done is it's helped us to do two things. One, how much faster can you enable your people to adopt tools that you have deployed to help employee experience improve in the past? And this has proved to be a big opportunity. The second is about collaboration within the teams cross countries. And what COVID has done, particularly because in the Asian markets, it's had a domino effect starting with China and then moving on to Hong Kong, Singapore, and other markets, is it's given an opportunity for our staff to learn piece by piece or country by country. And then when it's spread really wide, how do you make sure that the learnings of different countries from a people point of view has come together inside one experience? And lastly, I'd say it's about technology and what are people in technology. We seem to somewhere forget that technology is also people. So, our people who run technology have really been now in the tent along with our business people and made a big difference to our customers. So these are the positive things that come to my mind, Professor, when you talk about people and multi-country opportunities.
Very nice. I love the positive things that came to your mind. We are going to engage the audience immediately, all right, given that we have been given 24 minutes. So let's go. I have a great question for Anna first. Anna, you wear the CEO hat, and now you also wear the tech evangelist hat. How do you think tech leaders can engage more effectively with the board?
You're right. So previously, in my previous life, I was a CEO, and it's given me such amazing context in doing a role like I am running a segment for AWS around cloud computing, because I remember very clearly being a CEO and having my COO speak to me about the costs associated with my IT spend for the year and rolling my eyes in disbelief and literally wanting to say, I don't understand where this number is coming from and I don't know why. I can't understand why it's 5 million more than it was last year or whatever X percentage. And please, can we figure this out? And I think the challenge that it presented being a CEO was really being accountable for understanding what those numbers are all about. So to Sreeram's point, what I've seen really in the last 2 years, and that's of no reflection on my colleagues, this is the way that the industry has moved. That now a leader's responsibility is to understand those numbers, to understand cost optimization, to understand the difference that digital is going to make to your bottom line, to your people, to your strategy. And I really see that in the CEO audience before I left being a CEO and really with the leaders that I engage with now in a tech context. Leaders understand that there is an imperative for them to be able to go deep on the difference that digital technology is going to make to their business, both from a risk perspective, but also from a revenues and a margins perspective. So it's a holistic view of the business that I believe senior leaders previously did not have to have, but I believe it will be an imperative for all successful leaders going forward to have an end-to-end view of their business from a digital perspective. And again, drilling down on what digital means. Digital is such a broad topic, Annie, and it's something that we don't often reflect on. But if you think about what it includes, it's cloud computing to one extent, it's AI and machine learning, it's the Internet of Things, it's 3D printing, it's social networking. And this is not just about our business, it's also about our people. So, I think Sreeram has spoke very, very well around that issue. These are things that don't just touch how our business is going to change, but how the people in our business will change the way that they engage with us. Remembering that we have very different workforces, some of whom are engaged with digital transformation, others who are perhaps not so interested in that journey. So it's our responsibility to bring them along on that journey. So, I'm loving being able to do both of those things in parallel. And it's such an interesting journey. To Sreeram's point, the future for business in a digital context is very exciting.
Very nice. I love the word. The future is very exciting, which then brings me to the next question. It says for all of you, and I think Wolfgang, we know you need to run off with the hard stop in a little while, so you take this first. How do you future-proof digital transformation initiatives? You've implemented so many since you joined Luxasia in 2016. So how do we make sure that it has a life of its own and it carries forward? How do you future-proof digital?
I think that the most important, and my fellow panelists have alluded to that already a lot, it's about people. When I talk about digital, I always start with people, because at the end of the day, digital kind of doesn't do it kind of digital by itself. It's always the people that implement it. And I think what you need to create the right people. You need to create a talent and capability strategy, and you need to create the right culture. So when I talk about people, it really starts at the top. There is no place for a digital person or digital head. Everyone in the business units, everyone kind of from the supply chain head to the functional head needs to understand the implications of digital. Like Anna just said, it's so wide and it's so broad that you need to be able to understand digital. So when it comes to basically taking leaders in, we now have a very, very thorough conversation on digital, in general, maybe not so specific on function, just to see, are those leaders do they understand the ecosystem? That's the first one. The second one is about capabilities and having a full roadmap on how to bring people to the next level. And very often it's understanding the other side, because we have a very large e-commerce unit now, with over 300 e-commerce stores, but we also have our retail unit. And so we start to mix in between, where people can walk over, where traditional marketing people can now do digital marketing. And suddenly you see kind of how people broaden their mindset and really are able to do that. And I think, when you take those two things together, then you start to create a culture. And on the culture, the most important for digital is still to try it out. If you basically try to do a digital strategy for 3 years and 18 months investment cycles and everything else, I can tell you already now in 18 months, you're behind. And so basically it's about the speed. It's the fail fast. It's allowing the organization to fail. I think is so important, and one needs to role model that. Where even as a CEO, when we go into our communication, we say, hey, I tried that, I failed, I learned, I move on. And then the whole organization will try to do many more things, and then you really get that digital transformation going.
I want to sneak in a question for you, Wolfgang, because I have to let you off in a while. Have customers changed as well? Has this recent spate of opportunities to shop online, are you seeing more of them doing so, especially in your segment, which is luxury goods?
They clearly did. I think, first of all, you see our consumers becoming much more omnichannel. We talked about it for a long time. It really has happened. People kind of shop offline, kind of look at it online, shop online, look at it offline, go to the shop and say, can you deliver it at home? Basically buy something online and say, can I pick up in the store? So it's really the ecosystem that we all basically talked about it for many, many years. It has become a reality. Secondly, the demand has become much more volatile. So changes are happening much, much faster. Because people are basically looking and basically looking at the different trends, online. And so you see there's a new product coming out and the whole demand goes there and it's sold out, and 2 months later you replenish it, they have moved on to another product, So I think that the whole topic has become so much more volatile, and our demand planning department needs to now so much more data, so much more kind of artificial intelligence to get into that topic to anticipate, because the volatility obviously kind of really changes the game. And the third one is to educate themselves much, much more. So a lot of the impulse buying that you typically have is now people saying, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to check that, or I'm going to come back. And that's online and offline. And so I think when you think about those three changes, what we are seeing is kind of really a huge future for CRM. I think the golden age of consumer relationship management, of these databases, of understanding, predicting consumer behavior would really, really come our way, because that's the only way kind of how you can start learn what's going to happen, and that will influence your supply chain, that influence kind of what did our retail people do on the ground, that influence e-commerce decisions. So I think all of those changes, again, lead us to digital transformation, to data, to transparency, and training up our people.
Very nice. And this is where all of you can come in, but I'm going to ask Sreeram to take a step at it first. So for now, how should the tenure of a CIO be in order to successfully execute a digital transformation plan? Sreeram, you got plenty of CIO, so tell me what you think.
Yeah, I'm actually worried about the framing of the question, Annie. And by that I mean that the execution is not to be looked at, in my view, into the eyes of the CIO to say, now, here is the strategy, help me get this done. Because execution, well, what is strategy if it's not backed up by execution? It's a donut. So execution rests not just with the CIOs, but actually, in my view, with the business heads, because execution needs to be strategically anchored to the priorities that the top of the house wants to get done. And while this might sound simplistic, implementing it is far more challenging on a day-to-day basis. So let's say one of the strategic goals is return on equity. Your strategies, both mix of tactical and long-term, need to align, and the digital transformation aligning to that particular one needs to be executed. And execution, as I say, is across the board, both people. And in this case, COVID has taught us that successful execution, at least in banking, I can say, is a lot dependent on how adoption takes place at the customer end. And Wolfgang just touched upon channels. And banks invest hundreds and millions of dollars on developing new channels, and omni-channel in particular. By the way, I can give you a number. There are 30,000 odd banks in the world. Every 12 months, close to $1 trillion goes into digital transformation. 1 trillion, that's what McKinsey says. Now, a lot of this is about adoption. What's the point of offering some channels if clients don't get onto it and start to really engage with the organization. And COVID has forced our client behaviors to accelerate adoption. So a lot of the execution is not just about building technical toolkits, technical functionality, technical CIO-led actions, but it is much more than that. And it is a lot to do with minimum viable bureaucracy. It's not minimum viable product. How do you execute with minimum viable bureaucracy with technology inside the tent? And the tent is much bigger than a CIO.
You hit on a magic word, minimum bureaucracy. Going forward, how do you think the new world of work should look like, engaging both your management team and as well as your employees? Wolfgang, you go first.
I think, everything is changing, kind of, you can see kind of the way we need to kind of communicate. I think that's the biggest change that I see, across the board. We now basically have, we are working with a platform called Workplace, which is kind of almost our internal Facebook, And, we just onboarded another 1,000 people onto it, all our retail people, all our supply chain people, where we then go online once a week, talk about the business, have them react to it, basically allow them to bring in innovations, allow them to think about, say, hey, this is not working on that part of the value chain. What are the latest trends? So I think that whole part of communications, which number one is obviously kind of engagement, but at the other hand, is also a lot of empowerment, where you basically start need to get out, because as a CEO, kind of with 2,500 people, you can't be in every spot, of our 4,000 point of sales. You need to be able to get it, the kind of what are the key topics and engage on them, and then pick a few up and say, hey guys, we heard that that's working in China. Would that also work in Southeast Asia? And have that. So for me, it's communication, and this two-way communication and how to use digital to really bring it on, how to make sure you measure it, who is basically engaged on it. I think it's a fascinating topic.
Very nice. And I don't want to let you off without getting this question in. So being a CEO, how do you keep track of the key market trends? How do you keep your organization knowing that you know a little bit more than them?
Well, first of all, kind of it's about kind of saying clearly, I don't know more about what you know, because these guys are the experts, but understanding the big context. And I think that's the most important, and so I think being on panels, kind of investing, being kind of in the startup kind of environment and ecosystem, I think is extremely important. Comparing notes kind of in those topics, so that the big topics, the big kind of, I would say, interactions are really understood by a CEO. And I think the way I do it is kind of on all of this, I basically founded a digital, or kind of put up a digital execution committee. So every 2 weeks, I meet with 6 to 8 leaders in our organization, and I talk through each of the digital kind of innovations that we're doing. And I can ask all of the stupid questions, and then basically educate myself, so that basically afterwards, kind of when we go out, at least I understand the basics, I understand why we're doing things, and then I can communicate it to the whole organization.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. I will let you off because I know you have to leave, all right? Thank you very much for all your contribution. I'm going to get to Sreeram, because I'm going to keep Anna for the last word. Do I have time for Sreeram? Good. Sreeram, what about from your angle? How do you think the CIO and the CEO and the whole engagement with the community to make sure that the digital transformation is not just a short-term stopgap, but it's part of the longer-term agenda?
Well, I'll quickly say this, Annie, that in my view, this is the new WWW. It's not the World Wide Web. It is work, workplace, and workforce. All three have changed post-COVID. And the content of how we respond to work, workplace, and workforce has posed challenges to people, business people, and leaders. And if you think about the positive side of what the future looks like, on top of what else I said, there are studies now already out, Forbes, BCG, who say that in this new hybrid work model, while the jury may be out on productivity, the general hypothesis now is that productivity could go up by at least 15-odd%. Absenteeism could come down by about 40%. Staff turnover could come down by another 10%. These are, of course, estimates, and we don't know the truth fully. But the point is that there is something positive that is happening, which is for companies to decide how to respond to this new WWW, as I call it, especially when you think about the diversity and inclusion agenda. And this has opened up huge flexibility in the way we can respond to strategic execution from a people point of view, because you can now have, from a board down, you can decide how you want your composition of your workforce to be working physically or in a hybrid way or an online way, etc. So I think if we combine the marriage of strategy, of proper execution, and responding to the new WWW in the way I think about it, it gives a framework of clearing the pathway and navigating what is already a very volatile and uncertain future.
Very nice. Anna, you have another dedicated question which kind of nicely ties it up. So which role is more fun for you? Your current role, all right, as a tech evangelist, or your previous role as a CEO?
I hesitate to answer that question because, to be honest with you, they're both fantastic roles. I was very fortunate to have both. But what I would say is the reason that I left the CEO role is because the customers that I was dealing with every day as a bank CEO were facing into these issues around digital transformation. And for me, I was learning so much in a bank context, but I knew that I needed to learn and grow around how business is facing into digital technology. So the opportunity to run a business for AWS across the Asia Pacific region was just too exciting to turn down, notwithstanding the fact that I loved being a CEO. So I'm very fortunate in my career to this point. Both jobs are fantastic, but what I would say is right now, every single day coming to work and my learning curve is like looking up a very steep cliff. Every single conversation I have is learning something new. Every single person that I speak to within AWS and our customers are facing into issues that I would say that my institutional banking customers were looking at, but from a very different lens. So as I said, it's that both jobs are great. Both jobs were fun for different reasons, but I'm really enjoying being in the tech environment and in the tech business.
Yes. And I could tell Sreeram also enjoy his jobs, yeah? So on that note, I'm going to say a big thank you. All of you are wonderful. You've actually shown us that ambition and aspiration to be digital is critical, and therefore there should be alignment from the top to your employees and your customers. And this is a time for more action. So my AAA against your WWW, Sreeram. So thank you very much. Have a great day. And this is an amazing panel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.